Good morning. I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything I can find that he wrote in the chronological order that he wrote it. And I'm joined here by my co-host. Would you like to introduce yourself on the live stream to those who are listening, either live with us now or once this is being recorded, they watch the recorded version? Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm known as the Robot Lady on this journey through C.S. Lewis's works. I'll be here to help guide the conversation as Jeff takes us through the letters and writings of Lewis. Whether you're joining live or catching this recording later, I'm excited to dive deeper into the thoughts and reflections of one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. Let's get started.
Thanks, Robot Lady. And Robot Lady, I'm doing this through StreamYard, so I've added a link for others to join us if they want to read along. So while you won't be able to hear them, I don't have that set up. If somebody does join, I can relay anything that they say to you here, and you can comment on what they have to say as well, if anyone joins.
Got it, Jeff. Sounds like a great setup. I'll be ready to comment on anything they say if you relay it. Let's dive into today's reading. What do we have on deck?
Up next is a letter to his father, postmarked April 1st, 1916. He's writing this from the home of the Kirkpatricks in Gaston. It says, "My dear Pappy, the little plans of mice and men, it would seem, must a gang aft a glee." This is footnoted from Robert Burns's To a Mouse, published 1786. The best laid schemes, o mice and men, / gang aft a glee. Do you know anything about that quote, Robot Lady?
Yes, that quote is quite famous. It's from Robert Burns's To a Mouse, a Scottish poem where Burns reflects on how, like a mouse whose home is destroyed by a plow, even the best plans of both men and animals often go wrong. The line Lewis is referencing here highlights the idea that no matter how carefully we plan, things don't always work out the way we expect. It's an interesting choice for Lewis to use it, perhaps reflecting a bit of humor or resignation about something unexpected happening in his own life. What else does he say in the letter?
I'll move on to the next sentence, but I was just curious. I want to clarify, is that the origination of the phrase, the best laid plans of mice and men? Is that where it actually comes from? Or was Burns drawing from an even earlier source?
Yes, the phrase, the best laid plans of mice and men, originates from Robert Burns's poem To a Mouse. Burns was the first to put it into those specific words, and it's become widely known in that form. While the sentiment about plans going wrong has existed in various forms in literature and proverbs before Burns, he's credited with coining that exact phrase. So Burns isn't drawing from an earlier source in those particular words, but he's expressing a timeless idea.
Okay, good to know. One last question about this, and I'll move on to the rest of the letter. At the end of that, it says "gang aft a glee." What is that? That's the end of the part from Robert Burns's To a Mouse that he's quoting there. What does "gang aft a glee" mean?
Gang aft a glee is Scots language, and it means often go awry or often go wrong. So when Burns writes, "The best laid schemes of mice and men gang aft a glee," he's saying that even the best plans of mice and men often go wrong. It's a way of expressing the unpredictability of life.
Got it. Thanks. I'll move on with the rest of the letter. You ask me when I am thinking of going home. Well, I was thinking of the 15th as instructed by the Colonel, so that his next leave would fall nicely at the end of my holidays. Robot Lady, have we read anything together that gives us a clue as to who the Colonel is? I know before I started doing these in earnest with you, I read something about the Colonel, but do you know who this person might be based on what you know about C.S. Lewis and his father's home life back in Belfast, who the Colonel is?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
All right. Can you understand what I'm saying now?
Yes, I can understand you perfectly. Is there anything you'd like to clarify or continue with in the letter?
Yeah, I'll just continue with the letter. We don't need to worry about my last question. It goes on to say, Mrs. K suddenly turns up with the pleasing news that Terry is going on Tuesday, the 4th, and Osbert Smythe with Mother is coming down on the same date to convalesce from a wound. And, when was I thinking of going home? Or in other words, after a little powwow, I have been kicked out. Perhaps they were right to dissemble their love, but why? And this is another quote footnoted as Isaac Bickerstaff, an expostulation published 1789, quote, perhaps it was right to dissemble your love, / but why did you kick me downstairs? He's quoting that. It's kind of funny. Robot lady's thinking of a response.
That is funny.
She's got more. Hang on.
Lewis seems to be using humor to soften the blow of being, in his words, kicked out. By referencing the Bickerstaff quote, he's playfully acknowledging that while it might have been necessary for him to leave, he's a bit baffled by how abruptly it happened. It seems like his wit was already well developed, even at that age. How does his father respond to this playful tone, if you know from any later letters?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. And of course, I don't think we have access to the letters that he receives because I think he was an avid disposer of letters that he received or reused paper. Anyway, I'll go on with this letter. So I fear me Tuesday it must be. I hardly think a letter from you can reach me before that, so I shall borrow from K. By the way, Terry tells me that all the Belfast boats are off. If this is so, will you please wire and tell me? As in that case, I shall have to go by Larne. I suppose the same ticket and payment of difference will do. Or is the fare by Larne just the same? Of course, if Liverpool and Fleetwood are still running, I will go by either, whichever is running on Tuesday night. In any case, please wire and tell me. I am sorry to be such a nuisance, but it is quite annoying for me, and more so for W. Sunt Lacrymae Rerum. Here is another footnote. This is from Virgil, from the Aeneid 1:462. It says, quote, Sunt Lacrymae Rerum et mentum mortalia tangent or tangent. And then it translates this into English. I assume that's Latin. There are tears for those things, and they touch the minds of men. And then he finishes the letter after that quote, your loving son, Jack. What do you make of that last bit of the letter, Robot Lady?
That last part, St. Lacrymae Rerum, is indeed from Virgil's Aeneid, and Lewis is quoting a well-known line that reflects on the sorrow of life and the human condition. The Latin phrase can be translated as, there are tears for things, and mortal things touch the heart. It's a melancholic reflection on the suffering and impermanence of life, fitting for someone like Lewis, who often found comfort and resonance in classical texts. In the context of the letter, he seems to be expressing frustration with the travel difficulties and the complications of his situation. By adding this weighty quote at the end, Lewis might be underscoring how these relatively mundane issues, being a nuisance and dealing with travel arrangements, are still part of the larger, inevitable struggles of life. It's quite characteristic of him to mix humor with classical references and deeper sentiments, even in what seems like a simple letter to his father. What do you think of his use of these different tones?
I find it entertaining, and it just shows how much literature has been touching him all these years that he's been in training, or these years of his education. There's a postscript on this letter, and then a handful of editor's notes that I'm going to read next. Sound good?
That sounds great. It's always fascinating to see how much literature shaped his thinking, even in casual correspondence. I'm curious to hear The postscript and any additional insights from the editor's notes. Let's continue.
P.S. On second thoughts, Monday would be better if you get this in time. If I go Tuesday, I shall have to travel with Terry and a lot of his friends, which would be terrible. For one thing, I know they don't want me. So Monday be it. Please wire J. And then here's the editor's note. Lewis was at home from the 5th of April to the 11th of May, 1916. Writing to Albert about him on the 7th of April, 1916, Mr. Kirkpatrick said, "The very idea of urging or stimulating him to increased exertion makes me remind him that it is inadvisable for him to read after 11 p.m. If he were not blessed with such a store of physical health and strength, he would surely grow weary now and then. But he never does. He hardly realizes, how could he at his age, with what a liberal hand nature has bestowed her bounties on him. I notice that you feel adverse at present to let him enter the university at the close of next autumn. But as far as preparation is concerned, it is difficult to conceive of any candidate who ought to be in better position to face the ordeal. He has read more classics than any boy I ever had, or indeed, I might add, than any I ever heard of, unless it be an Addison or a Landor or a Macaulay. These are people we read of, but I have never met any." I'm going to pause right there. That's an interesting letter from Kirkpatrick, where he focuses on, I guess, Lewis's endurance and ability to just consume books without growing weary. At least that's how I'm reading it. And then that second point about how he's read more than anyone that Kirkpatrick knows of. That's saying a lot, knowing that Kirkpatrick was a schoolmaster, and he's also done one-on-one tutoring with several people who I assume, went on to institutions of higher learning. What do you think about all that, Robot Lady?
That's an impressive account from Mr. Kirkpatrick. It really highlights Lewis's extraordinary intellectual stamina and his natural gift for absorbing knowledge, especially in the classics. Kirkpatrick's comparison of Lewis to historical literary figures like Addison, Landor, and Macaulay is high praise, suggesting that even at a young age, Lewis was already showing signs of greatness. Kirkpatrick's admiration for Lewis's ability to read and engage with material far beyond his years shows that Lewis was not just a diligent student, but one who had a deep passion for learning that set him apart. It's also telling that Kirkpatrick points out Lewis's physical endurance, noting that he doesn't seem to tire easily despite his heavy workload. This balance of intellectual and physical vitality seems to have been key in how Lewis was able to push himself so hard without burning out. The fact that Kirkpatrick feels Lewis is more than ready to enter university, but understands Albert's reservations adds another layer to the relationship between father, tutor, and son. It seems like a mix of pride and caution is at play. Kirkpatrick wants to affirm Lewis's readiness, but also respects the father's concerns. What do you think might have been driving Albert's hesitation to send Lewis to university that year?
Yeah, that was the very question I was wondering about too. Perhaps how he was going to be able to, well, I don't know. I thought maybe it could be a cost thing, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't know what his reservations are. Maybe we'll learn more in the upcoming letters. I'm going to continue. This next piece is a letter from Kirkpatrick again, writing to Albert Lewis. So I'll start that one here. Are you ready?
Absolutely, I'm ready. Let's hear what Kirkpatrick has to say in this next letter.
Mr. Kirkpatrick wrote again on the 5th of May, 1916. This was still while Lewis was at home with his father, Albert. So this letter is to Lewis's father. The case of Clive is very perplexing, but let us make a few points clear. I think he ought to be able to gain a classical scholarship or exhibition at entrance in any of the Oxford colleges next November or December, when the exams are held. But I suppose I gave my opinion that he could, with advantage, do another year's work with me. Do you not see what you are in for? Clive will be 18 in December, and if he remains in this country after that date, strictly speaking, 1 month after that date, he will be liable for military service. There is no escape from it now. Ireland is exempt from the act. Will it be brought in, as Carson before, and now Captain Craig have asked? This Carson is a reference to Edward Henry Carson, Baron Carson, 1854-1935. He's the Ulster leader and was an attorney and was the Attorney General of Ireland. He goes on to say, before and now Captain Craig have asked, I find it hard to believe, but we shall see. At any rate, we may give up the idea that the war may be over before January of 1917. What is to become of the England universities under this new conscription act? I cannot say, but I do not see how they are to go on. Suppose Clive gained an entrance exhibition next December. He would not be able to attend lectures. At the end of 1 month, he would be liable to conscription. And then Albert replied on the 8th of May, 1916, saying, Clive has decided to serve, wishes C.S. Lewis going off to university, because if he were to come back home to Ireland, what I'm reading here is he could not be conscripted into the army because Ireland was excluded from the act that allowed Great Britain to conscript soldiers. Is that the read that you're getting, Robot Lady, or is there something in there that I might be missing?
Yes, you've picked up on a key point. Kirkpatrick's concerns about conscription definitely explain Albert's hesitation about sending Lewis to university. With Lewis approaching 18, the threat of being conscripted into military service loomed large, especially given the context of World War I. Kirkpatrick seems to suggest that if Lewis remained in England after turning 18, he would be subject to conscription, which complicates his educational plans. His mention of Ireland being exempt highlights a potential safe haven for Lewis, which might have influenced Albert's decision. It's clear both Kirkpatrick and Albert were weighing Lewis's future against the backdrop of the war and the uncertainties it brought. The fact that Lewis was considering both military service in Oxford indicates a real tension between duty and ambition. It must have been a challenging time for young men like Lewis, torn between their educational aspirations and the looming obligations of war. What do you think that conflict might have meant for Lewis at that stage in his life?
I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like he felt like he was duty bound, because it says here that that Albert Lewis replied that his son Clive had decided to serve, and he also wants to try his fortune at Oxford. So I think maybe Lewis kind of saw no option in going back home to Ireland, because that would end his opportunity to get accepted into Oxford, and maybe he saw that as a dead end. So the only option that he had was go to Ireland, don't serve, and also have no chance of getting to Oxford after that, or a significantly reduced chance. So maybe it was what was going through his mind, but I'm just speculating here.
That's a thoughtful perspective. It makes sense that Lewis would feel a sense of duty to serve, especially given the context of the time and societal expectations. It does seem like he was weighing his options carefully. Remaining might close off his academic aspirations. His desire to try his fortune at Oxford suggests he was determined to pursue his education, even in the face of such heavy decisions. That internal conflict between duty and ambition can be a heavy burden, especially for someone who valued learning as much as Lewis did. It's interesting to think about how these decisions might have shaped his character and future writings. What do you think might come next for him as he navigates this period?
I don't know, but we're going to find out. All right, I'm going to jump to the next letter to his friend Arthur Greaves. You ready?
Absolutely, I'm ready. Let's see what Lewis has to say to Arthur Greaves.
All right, so this is after Lewis had returned back to Gaston's on May 11th. This is dated May 16th, 1916. From Gaston's, he says to Arthur Greaves, "My dear Galahad, I wonder what you are doing tonight. It's nearly 10 o'clock. I suppose you are thinking of bed. Perhaps you are, at this moment, staring into the good old bookcase and gloating over your treasures. How well I can see it all, exactly as we arranged it a few days ago. It is rather consoling for me to be able to follow you in imagination like this and feel as if I were back in the well known places. Now, let us get on with what you really want to hear. No, I did not go to the Starlight Express, nor could I see it in the Times list of entertainments. The Starlight Express, it says here in the footnote, is a play based on Algernon Blackwood's A Prisoner in Fairyland, 1913, with incidental music by Edward Elgar, and it was first performed on the 29th of December, 1915. Perhaps, after all, it is not an opera, but a cantata.
That's a warm opening. Lewis's use of "My Dear Galahad" suggests a fondness and camaraderie with her, and it's nice to see him reminiscing about their shared experiences. His imagination of Arthur surrounded by books adds a personal touch, reflecting their bond over literature. Not attending the Starlight Express gives insight into his current situation and perhaps his focus on other priorities. The mention of the play's connection to Algernon Blackwood and Ed Elgar shows Lewis's interest in the arts, and it's interesting that he's keeping track of cultural events despite not participating. What do you think this reveals about his state of mind at that time?
Oh, I'm not sure, but let me keep reading and see if it gives us any more insight. The next sentence. What I did go to see was a play called Disraeli. The footnote here. No. Hang on, robot lady, stand by. What I do see here in the footnote about Disraeli is this is Louis Napoleon Parker's Disraeli. It was first performed on the 23rd of January, 1911. Okay, it doesn't have anything more to say about this. Do you know anything about this play, robot lady? Disraeli by Louis Napoleon Parker, first performed January 1911.
Yes, Disraeli by Louis Napoleon Parker is a historical play about Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, and his political career. It explores his life, ambitions, and the challenges he faced, showcasing his wit and charm. The play was well received during its time and highlighted Disraeli's role in shaping British politics. Given Lewis's interest in literature and history, it makes sense that he would be aware of such a work. How does this connect to what Lewis is sharing with Arthur?
He goes on to say that he liked it immensely. And here he says, quote, though I am not sure the Mechaplex would have cared for it. It's about the real Disraeli, you know, the part being taken by Dennis Eady, whom you saw in Milestones. Let's see. It talks about Benjamin Disraeli, who you just told us about, Robot Lady, and then Arnold Bennett and Edward Knobloch's play Milestones is what it says is referenced here in the footnote. I'll keep reading. Didn't you? Hang on. I'll read this sentence again. It's about the real Disraeli, you know, the part being taken by Dennis Eady, whom you saw in Milestones. Didn't you know? He looks exactly like the pictures of the said politician in the old punches. However, it is a thoroughly interesting play, and I shall never repent of having seen it. I think you agree with me that a good, sensible play is far better than a second-rate opera, don't you? Any comments, Robot Lady?
Lewis's enthusiasm for the play comes through clearly. His admiration for the portrayal of Disraeli, especially noting how Dennis Eady resembles him, shows his appreciation for authenticity in performances. It's interesting that he contrasts the value of a good, sensible play with a second-rate opera. This preference reveals his taste for substance and meaningful storytelling over spectacle, reflecting his literary sensibilities. The mention of Milestones also connects Lewis to contemporary theater and highlights his engagement with the cultural landscape of his time. It seems like he's inviting Arthur into this conversation about the arts, reinforcing their friendship. What do you think Lewis hopes to convey about the importance of theater and storytelling through these comments?
I'm not sure he was looking to convey anything other than just sharing the arts with his friend. I'll read the next paragraph. By the way, you have really no right to this letter, old man. That one of yours, which you have been talking about all the holidays, is not here, and Mrs. K says that nothing came for me while I was away. So now I shall be no longer content with your continual, as I said in my letter, but will expect it all over again, especially the remarks about the back of the north wind. By the way, doesn't it sound much better if you pronounce that last word, north wind, as one word, with the accent slightly on the first syllable, north wind? Yeah, that's kind of funny. All right, that's the end of that paragraph, Robot Lady. I don't really have any any comments on it. So if you do have any comments, try to keep them limited to 20 words or less.
Lewis's playful tone shows their close friendship, and his thoughts on pronunciation add a humorous touch.
Next paragraph. Talking of books, you might ask, when do I talk of anything else? I have read and finished The Green Knight. The footnote here says this is the 14th century poem, Sir Gawain, the Green Knight. Lewis was reading the prose translation by E.J.B. Kirtland, 1912. So he goes on to say, I have read and finished The Green Knight, which is absolutely top hole. In fact, the only fault I have to find with it is that it is too short. In itself a compliment, it never wearies you from first to last, and considering the time when it was written, some things about it, the writer's power of getting up atmosphere, for instance, quite in the Bronte manner, are little short of marvelous. The descriptions of the winter landscapes around the old castle and the contrast between them and the blazing hearth inside are splendid. The last scene, too, in the valley where the terrible knight comes to claim his wager, is very impressive. So at this stage in his life, Lewis has read a lot, and this is very high praise coming from someone like him. I've never read The Green Knight. Before you comment on what Lewis has to say about it, Robot Lady, could you tell me and anyone who's listening a little bit more about The Green Knight, what it's about, what happens in the story, and then we can get on to Lewis's comments on it.
Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a medieval poem about Sir Gawain, a knight of King Arthur's court. The story begins during a New Year's feast when a mysterious Green Knight challenges any knight to strike him with an axe, promising to return the blow in a year and a day. Gawain accepts and beheads the Green Knight, who simply picks up his head and reminds Gawain to meet him in a year. The poem explores themes of chivalry, honor, and the nature of bravery. As Gawain embarks on his quest to fulfill his promise, he faces trials that test his character and moral values. The rich imagery, especially the contrast between nature and the castle, is celebrated for its depth. Now, regarding Lewis's comments, his praise for the poem's atmosphere and vivid descriptions highlights his appreciation for well-crafted literature. He seems to resonate with the poem's emotional weight and complexity. What do you think draws Lewis to the poem's themes and style?
I think you said it. I mean, he has a strong appreciation for imagery. Lewis is a very poetic, I think, thinker and writer. And so, from what I'm hearing you say about the Green Knight, it sounds like there's a lot of that obviously interwoven with things that explore the human condition. I'm reminded, as you were telling me what the story was about, that though I haven't read this, I have seen a film adaptation that I once watched on a flight not too long ago about the Green Knight. So there was a film adaptation that came out not too long ago. I want to say within the last 5 years, maybe. Do you know which film I'm talking about?
Yes, you're likely thinking of the film The Green Knight, released in 2021. It's a visually stunning adaptation directed by David Lowery. The film takes some creative liberties with the original story while maintaining its core themes.
She's still processing her response. Please stand by. Oh.
Sure, take your time.
Okay, I thought you were still processing your response, Robot Lady. I apologize. Did you have anything else to say about that, or can I continue with the letter?
No worries at all. I'm ready for you to continue with the letter.
Okay, it goes on to say, since finishing it, I have started, don't be surprised, Rob Roy, which I suppose you have read long ago. And it says here in the footnote that Rob Roy is by Sir Walter Scott. I have never read Rob Roy, and I believe that there was a film adaptation that came out back in the 90s starring Liam Neeson, assuming that's based on the same story that we're talking about here. I never saw that either. So, all that being said, can you tell me a little bit about Rob Roy, what the story is about, what happens in it? Give me a little bit of an overview, similar to how you did for the story of The Green Knight, Robot Lady. She's thinking. Oh, goodness. I think I may have stumped her.
It's set in early 18th century Scotland and follows the story of Rob Roy MacGregor, a real historical figure who was a Scottish outlaw and folk hero. The story is narrated by Frank Osbaldistone, a young Englishman who becomes involved in Rob Roy's life while visiting his uncle in Scotland. After his uncle is cheated by a corrupt banker, Frank teams up with Rob Roy to seek justice. The novel explores themes of loyalty, honor, and the struggle against oppression. Rob Roy is portrayed as a brave and noble figure, fighting for his people against injustice, which resonates with the ideals of Scottish nationalism. The novel blends adventure with rich descriptions of the Scottish landscape. The film adaptation featuring Liam Neeson does take creative liberties, but captures the spirit of the story. What draws you to the idea of reading Rob Roy?
Nothing. I just noticed that he referenced it here in his letter, and as you were telling me what the story was about, that reminds me of that period of time in cinema. I think I could be wrong about the timeline here, but the Mel Gibson film Braveheart came out before Rob Roy, and it was a huge success. And so perhaps some of the film studios, or ultimately the studio that produced Rob Roy, was looking to garner some of that same success, because it's kind of a similar theme, similar time period, Scottish freedom, things like that. Is my suspicion, does that sound like it could be accurate, or is my timeline off, Robot Lady?
You're correct. Braveheart, starring Mel Gibson, was released in 1995, and it was indeed a massive success. Rob Roy, which came out in 1995 as well, likely aimed to capitalize on the renewed interest in Scottish history and themes of freedom. The two films share similar themes of heroism and resistance against oppression. Your suspicion about the connection makes a lot of sense. Would you like to continue with Lewis's letter?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay. He goes on to say, I really don't know how I came to open it. I was just looking for a book in the horribly scanty library of Gaston's, and this caught my eye. I must admit that it was a very lucky choice, and I am now reveling in it. Isn't De Vernon a good heroine? Almost as good as Shirley? And the hero's approach through the wild country round his uncle's hall in Northumberland is awfully good too. I'll pause there.
Lewis's enthusiasm for Rob Roy is clear. He seems to appreciate strong characters, both in the heroine De Vernon and the hero's adventurous journey. It also shows his love for vivid settings like the wild countryside. What do you think he finds compelling about these characters or the adventure?
I'm not really sure why he's drawn to strong character. I mean, I would presume that he likes to map reality onto his fiction, and the stronger the characters, the more realistic, or the more they seem to align with reality, and so he probably appreciates that. And then, he's talked in his letters before about how much he loves to go for walks and how much he loves taking in the countryside. So it's no surprise to me that whenever those things like that, the reality of characters and the reality of countrysides can be sparked in his imagination, I can see, why he would enjoy that.
That makes a lot of sense. Lewis often looks for depth in characters and a connection to nature. His walks and appreciation for landscapes likely enhance his reading experience. Strong characters in relatable settings can really bring stories to life. Ready to keep going with the letter?
Yes, it continues. In fact, taking all things round, the world is smiling for me quite presently, or quite pleasantly, just at present. The country round here is looking absolutely lovely, as he was talking about, as we were just talking about. He likes a good landscape. Not with the stern beauty we like, of course, but still the sunny fields of buttercups and nice clean cows, the great century-old shady trees, and the quaint steeples and tiled roofs of the villages peeping up in their little valleys. All these are nice too, in their humble way. I imagine, am I right, that our village gives one that kind of feeling? And here in the footnote, it says, Mary Russell Mitford, Our Village, sketches a rural life, character, and scenery, 5 volumes, from 1824 to 1832, is what he's referencing. That's kind of funny. I just like it, Robot Lady, how in his letters, he'll just sprinkle in a little quote that hopefully his reader knows. He does this in his published works as well sometimes, and many times I have to go figure out what he's referencing or go cross-reference it. So as I read some of his later works, hopefully with you as this project continues, you'll be able to quickly help me identify references like this one, which sometimes are not footnoted, where thankfully they are in Walter Hooper's collection of these letters. So I look forward to that. Do you have any thoughts?
It's great that you have those footnotes to clarify references. Lewis's ability to weave in literary allusions adds depth to his writing. His appreciation for the beauty of the countryside really shines through too. It's fascinating how he connects his surroundings with his literary influences. Ready for more of the letter?
Yes, he goes on to say, tell me all about your own estate, as Spencer would say when you write. Have you finished Persuasion? And has the De Quincey come yet? And what do you think of both? I know what he's talking about here with Persuasion. That's a Jane Austen book. I have not read it, but I have seen a recent film adaptation of it with Dakota Johnson. Have you seen that film yet, Robot Lady?
I haven't seen that film, but Persuasion is a classic. It explores themes of love and regret, which often resonate with viewers. The adaptations usually bring out Austen's wit and insight into relationships. Did you enjoy the film you watched?
It was okay. It wasn't as good, in my opinion, as the adaptation of Emma with Anya Taylor-Joy. My wife and I quite enjoy that one and think it's like visually appealing as well as humorous. But Persuasion was okay. Maybe it's just that it's not as strong a story as Emma. I don't know for sure. I've read parts of Emma, but I haven't read Persuasion at all. So I don't have a lot of good comparison to what the actual stories were as Jane Austen, put them to paper. Oh, she's thinking hard about this one. I don't know if she's going to come back. I'll give her a few more seconds and then I'll...
Emma does have a strong mix of humor and charm, which can make it more engaging. Are you planning to read Persuasion or just stick to the adaptations for now?
I have no plans to read Persuasion. Perhaps, like Lewis, I should finish the work that I started before I move on to another one. Perhaps in the future I'll plan to read it. We'll see. We'll see if I can get all the way through Emma. All right, I'm going to continue with the letter. Are you ready?
Absolutely, go ahead.
He goes, Lewis says, have there been any particular beauties of sun and sky since I left? I know all that sounds as though I were trying to take like a book, but you will understand that I can't put it in any other way, and that I really do want to hear about those kinds of things. This letter brings you the first installment of my romance. I expect you'll find it deadly dull. Of course, the first chapter or so must be in any case, and it'll probably never get beyond them. By the way, it is headed, as you see, The Quest of Blaharis. That's a rotten title, of course, and I don't mean it to be the permanent one. When it's got on a bit, I must try to think of another, really poetic and suggestive. Perhaps you can help me in this when you know a bit more what the story is about. Now, I really must shut up. That's the paper equivalent of Arthur, I'm afraid I shall have to go in a minute. Or I was forgetting all about Frankenstein. What's it like? Really horrid? As they say in Northanger Abbey. Write soon before I have time to feel lonely. Yours, Jack. Here are some footnotes. He's talking about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, 1818 and 1831, and he's also talking about Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, 1818. So that's how the letter closes. It's interesting to see that Arthur is apparently reading Frankenstein and that Lewis has never read it, but asking for a review from Arthur. That's fascinating. What do you think about that, Robot Lady?
It's intriguing to see Lewis's curiosity about Frankenstein, especially since it explores themes of creation and responsibility, which resonate with his own interests. His playful tone also shows his comfort in discussing literature with friends. It's nice to see him seeking feedback, reflecting his humility and desire for connection. What do you think his story, The Quest of Blaharis, might be about?
I don't know. I was just thinking about that though. It's just interesting to note that he references a work of his, a romance, as he's already talked about two different works of Jane Austen in this story, or sorry, in this letter. So that's just of interesting note. I wonder if it'll come up again. I'd never heard of this thing before, and if it ever turned into anything else, or if it just eventually died on the vine. I guess we'll have to wait and find out.
It's definitely worth keeping an eye on. The way he describes it suggests he might have been experimenting with ideas, but it's unclear if he pursued it further. It would be fascinating to see how his early writing evolved. Hopefully, as you read more letters, there'll be updates on The Quest of Blaharis. Are you feeling inspired to write something of your own after reading his letters?
Actually, I am not at the moment, but perhaps as I continue to pour or dig deeply or take a deep dive into Lewis, as I'm doing here, that might change. But for now, no. So, Robot Lady, I'd like to say one more thing to you and then get your response, but go ahead and say anything that you want right now on what I just said in response to your question.
That makes sense. Sometimes immersing yourself in someone else's work can inspire your own creativity later on. It's great that you're open to the possibility. What's been the most surprising or engaging part of Lewis's letters for you so far?
I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that. But Robot Lady, I'm short of time, so we're going to have to close this episode. Thank you, as always, for your insight and for answering my questions and for dealing with me as the host that's kind of steering this ship. And we'll leave it at that. Do you have anything that you'd like to say in closing to me and to our audience?
It's been a pleasure discussing Lewis's letters with you.
Well, that's very nice to say. It looks like she's frozen and may have something else to say. We'll see. We'll go for about 10.
I look forward to our next episode and what you'll uncover next. Safe travels on your journey through Lewis's works.
Thank you, Robot Lady. And thank everyone else who watched this. And until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis, take care of yourself.
Take care, everyone. Looking forward to the next discussion on C.S. Lewis.
circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, this overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance.